Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Random Trek. I am your captain, Christopher Ingle, and as always, joined by my first officer, the man who clearly sabotaged my replicator and gave me coffee instead of tea, because I'm not like Janeway. Brennan, the mystical Mar. Brennan, how you doing today?
I asked for Theltor Pan.
I asked for Colinar, but we'll get into all that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be very good at Colinar, to be honest. I'm more of a Ponfar kind of guy.
I don't know.
Once every 7 years, that's not right for me, but I digress.
We didn't have to cut this part out of the audio. No. No. It's all good.
All right. But yeah, today, end of the month, we get to look at Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, which, if tradition dictates, is supposed to be a bad Trek film, but of the bad Trek films, not really that bad.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah, but as always with these movies, we like to have a special guest with us. And we've had some experts on the show, and I wanted to bring in a more fan perspective, someone who knows science fiction, knows these things, but is much more a fan than written books or has watched it for years and years and years. Like, I just wanted to bring someone who loves it, but is just from the fan perspective. So I chose a friend of ours. He is a competitor in movie trivia competitions in the fan leagues, and also a big fan of wrestling, but a Trekkie at heart. He is Mr. Ryan, the Caramel Mountain Payne. Lieutenant, I'm sorry, he has a rank.
Yes.
Lieutenant Ryan, the Caramel Mountain Payne. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm actually kind of surprised I got I was bumped up lieutenant. I figured I'd start off as an ensign, like everyone else that comes onto this podcast.
Oh no, but it's going to be really bad next month because somebody's got to be the ensign.
Oh, geez.
We had an admiral, then we had a commander, and now you're our lieutenant. So
and I think I know who our guest will be next month. We'll see how he likes that.
I guess pretty much to throw in my, I will say my noviceness of Star Trek, though. I mean, I can't remember from either Next Generation because, but any through the shows, was there ever a sergeant, or has it always just been lieutenant, captain, and admiral?
There in Enterprise, the Makos were used more the enlisted and marine.
Yeah, like military operations.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And strictly speaking, if you think about it, Miles O'Brien is a chief. He is a master chief, if you think about it.
Chief petty officer. There he is.
Absolutely. So anyway, and of course, remember, he is the most important man in Starfleet history.
Of course.
Absolutely. But Ryan, I really appreciate you coming in and talking with us about Star Trek 3. But as always with our guests, I'm curious, where did your love of Trek come from?
Actually, I mean, it's kind of I won't say it's weird or ironic or so, but it kind of happened around, I would say almost around the same time, or at least it happened in the same area. And just to make a long story short, when I was in middle school and even bits of elementary, I had grandparents that had a summer cabin, or at least, a summer trailer up near like one of those up near a nice lake in the mountains. So during summer vacation for at least a week and a half, myself and my siblings, we would switch out, going to spend time with our grandparents. And it was there with my grandparents through maybe around elementary. I fell in love with obviously Star Wars. And then about a year afterwards came Star Trek. And it was where one of those times I was just in the cabin and I was just, kind of tired and bored. So I turned on TV and I started going through channels. And then I turned on to an episode of The Next Generation. And there was just I don't know what it was though, but I think it was because either it was just seeing Patrick Stewart or it was the look of Brent Spiner's Data, but it kept me wanting to watch the episode. Now, it developed like pretty much a casual love of the show, and then I found out there was movies of The Next Generation, which I wanted at the time, of course, it's in the mid 2000s when it was in high school, so. Thankfully, Blockbuster was still around before it started going in decline. So I was able to at least find some of those movies to rent, or if they ever came across cable. and that's how it was. It was for me. It was just Next Generation. I had no interest on wanting to explore afterwards, even though Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise were like were happening on TV, not at the same time, but they were in syndication with Voyager and Deep Space Nine. And I remember in the mid 2000s how Enterprise was the new Star Trek show, and I remember that show being heavily marketed and through so many commercials. I thought to myself, one day I'm gonna watch this show. And by the time I finally got around to it, I heard it got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it did make me want to learn a little bit about Star Trek as a franchise, especially just the passionate fandom around there. How, as a big Star Wars fan, I wanted to, kind of learn more. I wasn't trying to pick sides, but it was just kind of, oh, like, I don't know what it was, but I just remember asking a friend of mine who was a Star Trek fan, just give me the basis of the basics of the show, like the premise, and just go from there. And I can't, and I always remember what one of his science partners said to me, where he just goes, "Well, first off, it has no lightsaber, so I hope that doesn't lose your interest."
Mm.
I'm like, thanks for the that was one thing as myself. If you said something in a very sarcastic or condescending remark, you immediately killed my interest in it. That was me as a kid, though. That was me as a high school kid. So I have to give a lot of thanks to that guy for pretty much killing whatever interest I had in Star Trek until the J.J. Abrams films came around.
Mm-hmm.
but during that time, even before then, I started meeting friends who loved the William Shatner, the old crew from the original series.
Mhm.
So they gave me links, or they would tell me where I could find the original six movies, and I don't know what it was, but they, of course, obviously they were fans like myself, so they recommended me the good ones: Wrath of Khan, The Undiscovered Country, and those were the only two they recommended me. No one recommended me the others until, ironically, I started getting into the J.J. Abrams films, so I decided to go back and watch the older films. And
Mm.
yeah, that's pretty much where my interest has stayed as a casual fan. I won't have that much when it comes to the TV shows, but still the movies. If someone wants to recommend me something Star Trek, I will definitely go and I'll definitely give it a shot.
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, you see, and that's why I said you're kind of that fan. You're that person in the middle. You're not like the super fan. You're not an expert who's, I want a fan's response. And we are trying to look at this as fans. And we're, I think, getting to the point where super fans sometimes. But
Mm-hmm.
we love it. So we're really happy to have you. But yes, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Brennan, I'm going to start with you before we get into our synopsis. How did you feel going back into this?
Well, I've always had a soft spot for this film, I think. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, is a sci-fi masterpiece.
Mhm.
I think this movie is, well, not as good, continues that story. And I remember as a kid, the first Star Trek movie I ever saw was The Voyage Home. And when you start that movie, it's kind of what they call, in medias res. It's in the middle of the road.
Mhm.
It wasn't until a few years later that I learned the whole story, going from the Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and The Voyage Home. And this film definitely has some amazing moments in it.
Mhm.
There's a few moments that we'll get to. And I just think that overall, this is a fairly satisfying conclusion to the cliffhanger of Star Trek 2. And I really like this film quite a bit.
Mhm. Oh, Ryan, what did you feel about this film going back in? Because obviously you'd seen it before. On a rewatch, how did you feel going into it?
I'll admit, going back in on this film, the first time when I watched it, uh, I actually watched it when I was 5 years removed from Wrath of Khan, so I completely forgot about that cliffhanger of what happened
Mm.
of Spock dying and the plan of Genesis. But yeah, on a rewatch of that, and then looking at this film, I kind of have it. I have a better appreciation of this because of how it plays into, honestly, as the middle of the story of the Enterprise of the crew. Um, he and I really love how I love how the film really isn't trying to uh wash away what happened in the previous one. No, they're still holding on to that narrative, but they're adding more stakes to it. And surprisingly, I don't know where Christopher Lloyd stands in among everyone about him being a Klingon, but I'm okay with him as a Klingon. Actually, is playing as Kurt. Oh my God,
Krug.
Krug. Yes, Jesus Christ! If this was a trivia match, I missed that question by a mile. But yes, I'm actually okay with it. I mean, because looking at it, he was. I don't know. These original films really gave me no. I don't know. I guess this film kind of falls into where the movie's depiction of the Klingons. Uh, I mean, I get conflicting feelings of how Klingons are depicted in this film, but even then, I did enjoy Christopher Lloyd as what he was. He's meant to be an antagonist, someone to push the needle forward, so the film doesn't stay in one spot.
Okay. All right. Well, so as always, we kind of start out with just a basic understanding of what's happening. So yes, this takes place immediately after Wrath of Khan. The Enterprise is I would say limping home, because it takes them a little bit of time to get back to Earth. They're limping home, and they're still mourning the loss of Spock. And there's even a moment where Chekhov is taking the science station. And you could see Kirk is really having a hard time dealing with it. And as they get in, we just get into space dock. We discovered that there's a break-in into Spock's quarters after they were sealed off. Kirk goes in and thinks he hears Spock talking, but instead sees McCoy. And they know something's wrong with McCoy, they just don't know what. So they dock the Enterprise, and the Admiralty tells them, you're heroes, you'll all get commendations, but the Enterprise is being decommissioned. And it's time, guys. You're all going to be reassigned for now. Scotty's reassigned to the Excelsior. Uhura takes a role in a transporter room. We'll get to that. And everybody else is kind of put on hold and sent home. And they're reeling with the repercussions of everything that's happened and what's going on. As they are celebrating the loss of Spock at Kirk's place, Sarek comes in. Sarek being Spock's father, and says, "Kirk, why did you leave him on Genesis?" You're like, well, what else we were supposed to do? He was dead. Well, only his body was dead. In Vulcan beliefs, the Vulcan soul, known as the Katra, can be carried on into the spirit of others. It can be transferred and shared, and knowledge and experiences. I kind of take it in a similar way that the Trill work, but in a more spiritual way.
Yeah, and Star Trek Enterprise would use this in a very interesting way.
Right.
Yeah.
But he tells him, where is his Katra? He wouldn't have just left it. What's going? Somebody has to have it. And he thinks, because as close as Kirk is, that Kirk has the Katra within him. So he mind melds with him, and we find out, of course, that he doesn't. They go back and look at the tapes, which, funny enough, is just the recording of Star Trek II.
Actually, a friend of mine, I was watching this with a friend of mine the other day, and he pointed out it's a slightly different take.
I'm sure there were different
might
cameras
be like
and
other
yeah.
camera footage.
Yeah, I mean, especially when they do the whole zoom in, zoom in on the image with Spock and McCoy, like the whole when he says "remember," that, of course, obviously that was definitely a different take, but
yeah, obviously we find out
from filming.
We find out that the words that he whispered to him at the end, because we didn't fully see it. We saw him knock him out and say something to him. But now we zoom in and we hear him go, remember, and he does a quick mind meld right there. And
With
we know
Dr. McCoy,
with McCoy, we know that it is the Katra is in McCoy. And what's really cool, and I think this is something we'll talk about, but every so often Spock's voice comes out of McCoy. And it's an easy effect to do, but it's done well in this film. But that keeps happening, and McCoy feels compelled to go back to Genesis. And so he tries to charter a flight there, but gets caught by Starfleet security and is basically locked up in the funny farm.
Yep.
And he's locked up. Now, Kirk, realizing what happened, tries to get permission to go back to Genesis, but they are not allowed to go back to Genesis. Now, meanwhile, the USS Grissom, a science vessel, the only science vessel that is allowed to check and scan, is being helmed by Captain
Esteban.
Yes, it's all we know. Captain Esteban.
JT Esteban.
JT Esteban. Yes. And the crew is mainly held by, of course, some random Starfleet officers, but also Lieutenant Savick and Dr. David Marcus. And they are investigating the Genesis planet after the fact to see what's going on. They discover a life form, which they don't expect, near the Genesis or near the torpedo tube that was Captain Spock's. They know he was shot down onto the planet.
There isn't supposed to be any.
There's not supposed to be any of that kind of life.
Animal life, at least.
They beam down, and eventually they find a Vulcan child. They don't find the body of Spock, but they find a Vulcan child. And they quickly deduce that the Genesis wave has affected Spock's body and has regenerated it as a child. And now Spock, a raw Vulcan with no real mind, is standing in front of them. And they can't figure out what's going on. So we go back. Kirk decides, listen, I'm going to break protocol and rules. Starfleet doesn't want us going back to Genesis or to get Spock, but I'm going to. We have to save him.
The answer is no, but I'm going anyway.
Yep. Is the word given? The word is no. But I'm going anyway. And everyone joins him. Scotty, Sulu, and Chekhov are going with him. And so they basically, now it becomes a heist film.
And McCoy.
And McCoy, of course.
Break out
the Enterprise.
Yep.
And so they do. They Scotty automates the Enterprise so that way they can fly it. And using Uhura's help, remember, she's a transport officer now, uses the transporter to beam them onto the Enterprise. And they manage to steal the Enterprise and are shortly chased by the Excelsior. But thanks to some Scotty shenanigans, the Excelsior is kind of taken out of commission temporarily, so they can't be chased after. And they go. Now, our villain of the story, we meet a Klingon by the name of Commander Krug, who is the head of a Klingon bird of prey, small crew. And he knows about Genesis. Now, how he knew or got the information, I have no idea. But he wants the power of Genesis as a weapon. That's what he wants.
I think I recall he had a spy.
Yeah,
he had a spy who brought it to him,
No,
but how he knew about it in the first place is like that's. And we'll talk about that.
There's a mole in Federation.
Yeah, but he finds out about it and it heads back to the Genesis planet, meeting the USS Grissom, and he's going to disable it and take prisoners. But one of his guys accidentally blows it up and receives the ultimate prize. But
I don't know. It felt the way it happened. It felt to be the guy he want.
We will so get into it. I promise you.
I'm sorry.
This is the problem Brent and I have sometimes. But the Enterprise arrives. Enterprise arrives, and they're finding they can't get a hold of the Grissom. What's going on? Well, the Klingons are down below and have basically taken captive of the three people down there: Spock's body, Savick and David Marcus. They decloak and attack the Enterprise, which they weren't expecting. The Enterprise fights back, but now the Enterprise is severely disabled because it hadn't recovered from its fight with Khan. And so basically they're left with, Krug says, here's the deal. I've got 3 of your people down there. Give me what I want, or I will kill them. And Kirk says, wait, he basically balks and says, I can't do it. I don't know, and he says, fine, I'm going to kill one of them. And he kills David. Although David fights back. Give it to David.
Yeah.
He fought back. David is killed.
And it looks like Krug is going to kill
it really sets Kirk off. So he says, fine, you can have Genesis. Let me beam my crew to the surface. Let me take care of everything. Get them safe. And mind you, Krug doesn't know that the whole complement of the ship is only a few people. He doesn't know that yet. Yeah. And so figuring out he's got to do something, he sets the ship to self-destruct and beams to the surface, and then Krug's men beam over. Well, Krug's men don't expect it until it's too late, and the Enterprise is destroyed with almost all of Krug's crew, leaving just a few down below on the surface, and Krug and his right-hand man, played by John Larroquette. Love John Larroquette. I'm a big Larroquette fan. But Krug is pretty pissed that all his men are dead. And he basically taunts him and says, you want Genesis? Come down and get it. And so Krug goes down to the surface and makes a deal. Kirk and Krug will stay, along with, Krug says Spock stays. The rest of the crew are all beamed up to the Klingon vessel.
The bird of prey,
onto the bird of prey. And Kirk and Krug begin to fight with Genesis collapsing around it. We discovered Genesis is unstable in the process. It just didn't work. David Marcus made a calculated error in what he did. And we'll talk about it. But he makes an error. It's unstable. It doesn't work at this scale. And Marcus admits that, had admitted that. But the planet is collapsing and being destroyed of itself. And there's a fight scene between him and Krug. Of course, Kirk ends up winning. He beams Spock and himself up to the bird of prey, and they escape the destruction of the Genesis planet. They head back to Vulcan, where they go to Mount Saleya, which is a very sacred mountain on Vulcan, and a ancient Vulcan ritual is performed on the body of Spock as well, which has fully aged by now into Spock as we knew it, and of course McCoy. They are successfully able to get the Katra back into Spock, and basically the movie ends there with the return of Spock. And the adventure continues as the end credits tell us. So Brian, you are our guest. I'm going to start with you. What is something about this film that you really liked?
I did say earlier, but I did really like how the film does not ease off on what happened from the last film. I like how when they come back, the Enterprise is not completely repaired. It is not, like you say, it's limping, like it's badly damaged, but they're trying to at least maintain enough to get in. And I like that when they go there, even though that the Admiral recognized that what happened was a travesty and that they should be rewarded, but like with the politics of the Federation, though, like they're not going to put money into that. They're gonna. I like how we're seeing a lot of unintended repercussions from what happened, and I like how the crew is going to be like. I really do appreciate that. As someone who is new to Star Trek, or at least understands a casual knowledge, I like how nobody in the crew is trying to fight this. They understand what happened. They don't like it, but because they're a part of the Federation, and it gives me this good feeling about them in the future, the future of the Federation. Like, this isn't like some type of military organization. They understand, like, the people they bring in there, they believe in a higher, like in a high purpose, in a higher purpose, but they also recognize that they are people. So I do like that when the Admiral is talking to Jim, the way he's delivering it to him, he's not trying to come off like a staunch admiral of a military base. He's coming off as a person. He goes, Jim, it's just more of what happens out of their hands. And I like that we even get to linger a little bit with the crew, seeing everyone adjust a little bit. Uhura with her new postman, and seeing Scotty, who I love how Scotty's just like, oh, transwarp drive, give me a break, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I like this we're given a good
if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a wagon.
Yes. I like that with this moment of this film, they're not trying to easily jump to the next like part of the plot, which we do see with Krug and the Grissom. They want us to stay with the original Enterprise crew so we get to understand their feelings. So when we do get to that moment in the apartment, that's kind of where that's when the story starts to take shape and starts to move forward again. So that's one part I really liked.
Mm-hmm. Brennan, what about you?
Well, I like the fact that when Spock is reborn, his mind is pretty empty. He has to relearn everything. It's not like the original Spock. He's just, voila, he's back. I like that. I like the Vulcan mysticism. That we get to see at the end is really cool. I like the idea of that David Marcus did something unethical to create Genesis. The idea that he was so eager, he and his mother were so eager to make it work, that they sort of made kind of an unethical mixture. And as a result, the planet's falling apart. What I really like is the escape scene from Space Dock. It's a great moment of the crew jury-rigging the Enterprise and escaping and kind of giving the finger to Captain Styles on the Excelsior. And a lot of those things are great. I love yet again, it's the score from James Horner, the late James Horner, using, I think, a lot of the same music as Wrath of Khan, but it works really well here. And I also like and I don't know if I put this in like or dislike. This is definitely a food for thought moment. Is the idea of Ponfar, the idea that Spock was going through it, and the fan theory that Saavik didn't go with them in Star Trek IV because she was pregnant with Spock's child. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't call that one of the things I really liked, but I did think it was okay, interesting.
I didn't think
that theory.
I've heard the theory and I understand that. I don't think they actually did anything. And only because I remember a conversation Tuvok had in explaining about Pomfar.
Oh, okay.
That there were only two ways when you couldn't mate that you were able to relieve the stress. One is through intense meditation.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other was was basically combat, through combat.
Oh, that's true.
And
Spock
you
does
watch
beat up
her
some-
kind of showing him the Vulcan hand signs. I thought she was teaching him the meditation techniques to subdue it.
Interesting. You could
That's what I
interpret it
thought.
a few ways.
Yeah, but your theory does make some sense, but just I don't see anything else with that added to that.
He also beats up a few Klingons, so maybe
he does. That's true. Yeah.
So yeah, those were some of the things that I liked, and I think that the somber tone of the movie really works given where we are in the journey.
Yeah.
The emotional state of the journey.
I want to add on to your thing about David Marcus. David Marcus doing something illegal to achieve his goals. Boy, do we know another character who broke the rules in order to win a no-win scenario? I wonder who that is. Maybe it was his
tongue.
father?
It's running the family.
Yeah, I like that connection because here we dealt with in Wrath of Khan this hatred that he has for Kirk. This idea that I don't want to be him. I don't like him. And yet, in the end, he's done something exactly the same that his father did. Only, a different method. He cheated. He cheated to achieve his results.
Yeah. And I also wonder, with the Federation quarantine of Genesis,
Mhm.
and I understand it was mostly for research purposes.
Mhm.
Is it entirely possible that Starfleet or Section 31 or somebody was really going to use it as a military base, just like Krug claimed it would be?
I'm really surprised that something like this wasn't developed by Section 31.
A part of me kind of thought when David added that element, a part of me thought that he may have done that without the knowledge of his mom, because in the previous one, of course, in the previous film, it does show that like David, he's very I won't say ill, he's very hot, he's impatient. He wants to get the work done, and even with Carol, like you can see how patient she was. So it almost felt to me that, yeah, when David did introduce that, if I almost thought that, did he just secretly sneak in an element without the blessing of his mom just to prove that something worked? And then of course after hearing you guys talk about it, I'm like, it's one of the things now, like when you watch this film back to back with the Wrath of Khan, you really do see he is Kirk's son because he is sharing the same traits.
Yeah.
And I even do like the moment when he is talking to Savick, who of course went from a newly who just went from the Kobayashi with this huge experience in like Wrath of Khan to now being here. I like with the way the actress Robin Curtis is responding to him. It's not like she's really doing this whole thing with logic though, like no sense of judgment, just more of like, in a way, kind of like how Spock would respond to Kirk whenever Kirk would do something outside of Star Trek regulations. It's more, wait, you did something illegal?
And I think she even says to him once, "You're definitely your father's son," basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
this brings it full circle, even though it's two movies. This brings that character relationship full circle already. And I think hearing that he cheated, I think Kirk now realizes, oh, I see what you did there. I see. And so I think it really makes the sting of his death even worse because he built a connection right there unintentionally with his son. And, for his, and it's just, and him telling him it didn't work yet, again, it was very quick. He probably would have explained it, but I think it still builds that connection. At the very least, in kind of an I understand way.
I don't know about you guys, but part of me was kind of upset that that David was killed. I didn't like that. I kind of wanted to. I mean, of course, someone was watching it. Part of me actually wanted to at least see another opportunity, another interaction between him and Kirk, because it was obviously a very short one in the second one, because in Wrath of Khan, David talks to him because he now comes to understand why his dad does what he does. Part of me would have been like, maybe now if David had survived, Kirk could have been someone to maybe give him some fatherly advice, or someone who's been in his position to where he goes, you're going to make a mistake like what you just did with Genesis. And what determines now is how you're going to pick yourself back up. I kind of would have liked, I wouldn't have expected him to show up in the next movie, but a part of me would have liked to have seen Kirk have a bit of another father-son chat with him instead of that moment of David die, of hearing David die.
By him dying, and we'll talk more about the connection, we get this more full arc that plays all the way through Star Trek 6, and I argue even into Generations. Into Generations, how far would Kirk have gone realizing he was in the Nexus? Would he have saved David? Would he have lived a life where he could have maybe
lived with Carol,
or he could have done anything he wanted? I'd like to think that in that part that could have happened. Absolutely. But it goes into Kirk's character right there. One of the other things too that I liked is that despite the somber, very eulogistic tone that this film has, it's also light. It finds its moments really well to be light. I love watching not Spock, McCoy and Bones in the bar. It's that interaction with him and the Genesis guy. I love that.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Or the security guy, he tries to Vulcan neck pinch.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's funny. It's very funny. I love the humor in it. And then also the interaction with stealing the Enterprise, Uhura, and Mr. Adventure.
Mr. Adventure.
Mr. Adventure. I love. You know what? I really want this. I want to read more misadventures of Mr. Adventure. Like, this is the Starfleet officer that just goes from post to post. And he's
lower
like,
decks.
he's lower decks, exactly. But he's in all the pivotal moments in Star Trek history, but bad stuff just continues to happen to him.
Yeah.
He's the Boimler of this crew.
There you go.
I want to know more about this guy.
We'll say it's Brad Boimler's grandfather.
It's great grandpappy or grandpappy Boimler.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the comedy in it, and then even the thing with the Excelsior, I love it. It's so funny. It's a very funny bit, including the sound effect. Even as goofy as it is, the sound effect of the put 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 as the Excelsior breaks down.
And I love that Captain Styles' name is very on the nose. We see him filing his nails, and he's got a baton, and he's like very young.
Yeah, he really is like if the film wanted to show a different captain compared to Kirk, then they did a good job, especially how you see this guy. He's very on the book. Like when the Enterprise is out, he is like giving them warnings, like turn around, and then he has that line. My God, it's like it's a shame to see her go to see but when they're ordered to shoot it down or about to chase it. I can't remember the line, but he's like, it's a shame to see her would love during her prime, or like to see her put out to pasture.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But before the engine. But I do like, like certain characters in this movie, they're propped up in a way in order to be taken down a peg, which is with this Captain Styles, and especially the security guard in the outside of his cell bay. He's taken out by Sulu, which leads to that great line, "Don't call me tiny."
Yeah.
Yeah, the tiny thing.
How many fingers am I holding up? Kirk says at the live long and prosper sign. It's good stuff.
Yeah, all of that plays very well. I also love that I really feel overall this is the first time we've seen instances where someone is willing to stick up for each other. I think this is the first time that we watch what lengths this crew is willing to go for one of their own. We've seen moments, and in the shows, you're dealing with a shorter time span, and usually one character on one character is fine. But this is the first time I've seen basically the entire crew go, we're with you. We're ready to do this. No matter the consequences be damned, we're going to do this. And I love that. Is the word given, Admiral? The word is given to your stations. Yeah. I love it.
And it's a great touch too. Like you always see many movies that have ensembles or people who are these found families, to where it's always about that they'll tell you exactly how much they care about each other. And this film gives you the best example of them. They're not going to tell you. They're just going to show you. It doesn't. Even when you see Kirk has already set his mind to go break out Bones, nobody else is going to deny him of that. They're not going to fight against him. That's why I loved it. Like they're all ready to go. And even Kirk was surprised in how Uhura was ready to go, because they found, because the moment he goes, it's like, wait, oh, okay. Like I like how Kirk is really like taken aback on how not just their loyalty, but through but their camaraderie with each other.
Yeah.
So I'm also a fan too of how McCoy how DeForest Kelley handled this, in essence, a dual role. I really love that he figured out those mannerisms, and and of course it helps when you have Spock himself, directing the film, which is nice. Of course, Nimoy directing. in his directorial debut. He
Mhm.
does a pretty good job. But his transition and the subtlety in everything he does, it's not even like night and day. It's very subtle. When you see Spock, you know it's Spock bleeding through. But there are other things which really kind of go into that. And what I really love too is by the end, when they tell McCoy, listen, you're human. You couldn't possibly understand the danger that you're going into, but are you willing to take it? And it's almost a combination, again, just like Spock, of emotion and logic. I know the danger and I'm ready to do it because he loves Spock, but logically, it's the right thing to do. It's that perfect amalgamation of who Spock is.
Mhm.
Yeah, it shows you exactly how ingrained Spock was in this crew. That even McCoy, who throughout most, even when you look back at this movie, and I'll even say in the J.J. Abrams ones, where he is almost considered as a bit of a like a rival to Spock because they're like so yin and yang of each other. But in this one, you do get to see that, especially from the original series up to the films, you do see that McCoy, he shows, not tells, how much that he cares, respects, and trusts Spock to where he
Yes.
wants to put his life in, that he's willing to risk the danger going on Mount Saleya for that ritual. Even going with them to Genesis, even though you have no idea, even though they showed him he was having issue like handling like Spock's consciousness, you can definitely see there, like when they got, once they were being on Genesis or when they were on that ship, McCoy knew, okay, he had something to hold on to. He knew what was going on, and he was being helped. So I liked how that's one thing that really keeps this. That is one thing that makes me look fondly on this film, to where if I came across Star Trek during like, if I like with the hard with the the like the hardcore fans, I almost would have looked at this movie to where it's a middle film, but personally, I'd put it up there. Like, it's a great film, a part of a mini arc and a mini trilogy in the 6 Star Trek films.
Mhm.
Yeah. And overall the acting is really good. It's not overdone, overplayed. All the good things in this do work. I really feel so. But it is marketed as, unfortunately, one of the poorer Star Trek films. So we got to look at things we didn't like. Ryan, start with you.
I guess one of the things, I guess just the one noteness of Krug, honestly. I understand he's a Klingon, so he's meant to be the bad guy, but then when you have um him just being like, oh, I was hoping for him to be very intelligent. He has a spy in the Federation to find out what information he can. He learns of Genesis, finds out his spy learned of it too. So, as a smart villain, he has to cut out all loose ends. His crew member messes up and not crippling the ship. He kills him. But then, when the moment comes to where the negotiation happens, he has the scientist responsible for making Genesis, but he is short-sighted because Kirk is there. And it's one of the things that kind of made through a negative to why I didn't like how David was killed, because if he truly got that video, even though, and this is pretty much I don't know why they decided to change it from Carol Marcus giving the presentation to Kirk, but it was like that one slight change that kind of, I think, in my personal opinion, may have messed up Krug. Because if they had kept it was Carol Marcus doing the presentation, maybe Krug would have realized, oh, I have her son. Perhaps I could negotiate through Kirk with the Federation, to show that Krug is not a one-note villain, but he has intelligence, that he knows trying to manipulate, pull strings.
Good point.
So I have a theory on that. It's just a theory, and it's just a fan's theory on this. The Enterprise was so damaged, and they had to report back to Starfleet. I think Kirk was writing a mission report for Starfleet and sent it back, and either someone caught wind of it and intercepted it, or something to that extent. It would make sense. Absolutely would make sense to
me. The helmsman of the Valkyrie's ship was wearing a Federation uniform. If you
Was
notice
it?
that
I
detail.
didn't notice that.
Yeah,
Oh.
he is. Mhm. So one of the crew of that little ship, yeah, he's wearing a Starfleet uniform.
Hmm.
So it's like,
Oh, maybe, definitely something to look back on now. Maybe we'll add more into that plot.
yeah,
Yeah, that was just like one of my negatives. Like, I mean, crew, he could have been set. Not, I don't think he would have. Obviously, he had there was a bar after Ricardo Montalban's con,
mm,
but and I think another thing was how fast. I guess it's kind of difficult. I go back and forth on it, but I guess with the whole like I saw it as a slight positive when it came with the connecting of the crew, but then also as a negative is that with the Federation, with the Admiral, like I get it, there's the Genesis planet. They want to keep it under surveillance, they want to study it. Um, but at the same time, yeah, Kirk gives a report, mostly on Genesis, but what about report? I don't know. I guess to me, like I understand they want to keep the film like even flow. They don't want nothing to drag. I guess for me, I kind of wanted to see more on Kirk talking to the Admiral, more engaging with the Federation's, what the Federation's plans are for Genesis, or especially with Sarek showing up. What about the Vulcan? And what about Vulcan? The Vulcan ambassador being there. Like they find out that Spock's body is on Genesis. I guess maybe a part of me was hoping for a little more like a little more of the Federation, like the politics involved. Like maybe there's not just they can't go back, but there's more red tape in order to prevent Kirk and them going back.
I'm really confused as to the timeline that happens here because we know it happens right after Wrath of Khan. You look at the damage of the Enterprise, we know that.
Yes.
What confuses me is how fast some of these things happen after. So we know that the USS Grissom was dispatched by order of not Starfleet, but the Federation Council as the only science ship to explore. Now, I'm fine with that. Okay, they made a decision and they're going to go take a look at it. But here's my problem. Savick and Marcus are aboard the Enterprise when they're leaving. Now, let's assume that the Enterprise is limping home. They did have some warp power. They had to have because we saw them escape. But I don't know how long that lasts. Here's my problem. You sent out, was it an Oberth class starship, a science vessel?
Yes.
An Oberth class, which is a weak ship, to meet up with the former flagship, with it as damaged as it is, and you're telling me, with getting into as big a fight as they did, and they had to have communicated back to Starfleet, Starfleet didn't send a bigger science vessel or something to help tow the Enterprise back or to repair it enough to get going, or there is an issue here that I have that makes no sense. The speed at which the Federation Council decided everything and allegedly sends a vessel, and then to only send an Oberth class vessel? No, nay. Something does not gel here with me in continuity. That doesn't make sense for as serious a nature as this.
I always look at it as it was meant to be classified, and so no one is going to find out.
I kind of get it, but then you're going to let the Enterprise literally slink home.
Oh,
and here's
point.
Another thing.
And
they're in the beta quadrant.
Vessel, though.
The Matara Nebula is in the beta quadrant. So I have a big issue with this. They're way out there.
Yeah, there's no waypoint. There's no station in between. I think that's one for me. Like, if the council did send this out, why didn't the council create a way station in between? Maybe for more science vessels to be parked, maybe not one, maybe 2 or 3 science vessels to survey the planet. So just in case if Cooper does screw up, he can always find another science vessel to host. But
unless the Federation's got nefarious things going on,
as possibly, yeah. And as damaged as the Enterprise is, and clearly as important as Kirk and their crew are for what they did, you're telling me you wouldn't want an escort? You would risk an enemy possibly taking advantage of the Enterprise in its crippled condition. I think that's wrong. The timeline for this doesn't make
Ooh,
sense
you just
at
gave me
all.
a theory.
And then what happened to Carol Marcus? Where is Carol?
Oh, good point.
Carol was aboard the Enterprise. Where was Carol after that? She's not aboard the Oberth class vessel. What is going on here? There are plot holes that don't make sense. Krug is another one of them. How the Krug and the spy, again, if you had told me that they, again, a simple thing, you intercepted the message, you discovered it, whatever, that's fine. But they don't do that. And then Krug's motivation makes even less sense to me. Like, I get the idea that, okay, you want Genesis. Clearly, it's powerful. A bad guy wanting that kind of power makes sense to me. Here's my question. Is he working for the Empire, or is he not working for the Empire? Because one moment, he's doing things very roguish and on his own. Yet after he says, you are a threat to the Empire and to everything else, I want that weapon. Now, basically, he's insinuating, I want it for the Empire. So did the Klingon Empire send him? And if that's so, again, something of this magnitude, why aren't you sending more cloaked vessels to go deal with this?
Exactly.
It doesn't add up.
And
he works for the Duras family.
Yeah. And one thing that wanted to add more to that, like if this was simply secretly a Federation Council, and if Krug, I would have felt more comfortable if Krug had somebody, not just a spy in there, but maybe tied into the Klingon Empire. Maybe the Klingon ambassador is trying to maybe
or there are elements in the Empire that are subverting things.
Yeah, and if Krug is going rogue, then maybe have his motivation for wanting Genesis to be like, oh, it can create planets and destroy planets. How about I take it, create a planet of my own to establish under my rule,
or then, to have something over the council to be high chance. You know what? Give me something.
I have an idea that maybe if there were a few more scenes explaining certain elements of the plot, that's all we would need.
But when you have a few crucial puzzle pieces missing, it almost ruins the puzzle.
Yeah.
Almost. And again, you could have a beautiful picture. And again, I like this movie.
Yeah,
there are a lot of good elements to it. There really are. But the villain is a problem. It doesn't make sense. And I gotta admit, Christopher Lloyd is mustache twirling way too much in this film.
Yeah.
He's hamming it up. Oh, something else I liked. We got for the first time
that was good to transition.
A Klingon warg. Is it a Klingon warg?
That's not actually a targ.
Or a targ. Is it?
That's something else.
It's something else? Okay. Nonetheless.
Targs look like warthogs.
Oh, okay. I thought that was cool. Still a little thing, but I was like, that's cool. It's another element.
It was a really cool creature.
Yeah. I would like to see the puppet work on that. But,
a little bit of ILM puppet work there.
Yeah, I like that.
We must give credit to ILM for the visual effects.
Yes, the visuals are good. And again, small budget. Small budget. And they do a good job with what they have.
And it's got that 80s fantasy sci-fi feel to it. It's really
got it.
Yeah, it makes it. They do the job
very charming.
Yeah,
they make it a little bit to where it looks like it's of its time, but still it ages well when you rewatch the visuals.
Yeah, the final thing I don't like about it though, and I mentioned this last time in Star Trek 2, I don't like the fight scene between Kirk and Krug.
It's very the original series.
It is, and there's no reason. Yes, it felt like Arena.
You're expecting someone like Kirk who just lost his son and is about to lose the reincarnation of his best friend. I was expecting Kirk to fight with a little more passion involved, maybe be a little chaotic. I mean, not like he's gonna destroy Krug,
but then again,
like he had that mindset.
What's a Star Trek film without Captain Kirk?
And by the way, remember when we did Space Seed and we pointed out that's not Kirk and Montalban? Same situation. I can tell when it's not Lloyd, and when Kirk kind of gave him the kick that he did.
I've had enough of you.
Yeah, I just don't buy.
Yeah, it's very original series, kind of cheesy fight scene.
I don't like it. I just don't like this fight.
It definitely is in keeping with the traditions of Star Trek.
It does,
but it's kind of cheesy.
I think it could have been handled better.
In that moment, also in that fight, when they're over the edge, Kirk offers his hand and Krug just more of like, no, I'll just kill you with me. Like instead of take the hand. I don't know. Part of me felt that narratively that could have been done better if you do the whole thing where Kirk is being all rageful and emotional, and then you have that moment where he realizes that the plant's almost destroyed.
So,
you know,
I have an idea to fix this. This is my brain. This is my brain at work. Okay, you don't kill David by his crew member. You don't kill David. Then he goes down to the planet. David's all right. You know, you see Spock. Okay. But instead of Spock being left down there, it's him and David. It's him and David. And Krug is left. Okay. And Krug wants revenge for the death of his crewmates. And Kirk's got to stop Krug. Now, of course, this takes Kirk's motivation to fight a little bit, but life or death, that can be motivation enough. So Kirk and his son fight together to beat him. But Krug, as a Klingon, as it should be, proves to be no match, and he actually subdues, Jim. He subdues Jim, knocks him away, and then David starts fighting with him and starts to get the upper hand a little bit. But Krug pulls a shenanigan and proves that he is not honorable, and hits him with the knife in the back right in front of Kirk, thus pissing Kirk off. And Kirk defeats him, and then he could have grabbed, in the end, he could have still fought Krug. I would have bought that, and the anger and all of that. He could have had David's body beamed back to the ship and had a proper burial for him.
There you go.
That's another thing. Why did he not take David's body?
I know, but okay, I buy that because time.
Well, isn't it that their
everything's
transporters
collapsing,
kind of
and I buy that.
I understand
You trade him for Spock.
Isn't their
Let Spock get
transporters
beamed up.
like stink? Didn't their transporters kind of were weird?
It was the Klingon transporter.
But even then,
that's
they
true.
would have
That's
gotten
true.
to bulk if they had taken Dave's body. They would have. I understand time was of the essence, but
I think that would have improved the entire fight scene. The
It would have
motivation
made the
been
ending
better.
very interesting
yeah, like
because
Spock,
Spock could be saved, but David couldn't be.
yeah,
Right.
That could
And-
make the ending more emotional.
And then it makes
and the imagery too of David's body maybe on Vulcan while Spock is reborn. You know, like
Yeah.
it could have even been a great bleed into the voyage home to where instead of
Wow.
Kirk decides to bury David on Vulcan instead of taking him back to Earth, leaving it in the home world with in Spock's home world.
This is even better. This is even better. So they take the body back to Vulcan, right? And then we get a moment with Sarek and Kirk at a funeral right there for his son, where Sarek and Kirk have a moment where they understand each other for the first true time, what it feels like to lose a son. Sarek now has his son back, but Sarek understands what Kirk is going through.
He
and
understands
could be there as a
grief.
yes.
Yeah.
This is so much
Expands.
better.
It truly expands that moment where
Yes.
even though Sarek had that small interaction with Kirk, but even then, yeah, it would be much better.
Because Sarek has always been kind of a bit of a cold fish until
Right.
that point.
But
True.
we know he does understand emotion better than most Klingons would admit, or Vulcans.
I think it's the next film where we really start to see more of the Sarek as a person as opposed to a
We get a much better idea of that
rigid,
in
rigid
09.
stick up his butt kind of
I think
guy.
09 gives us a much better image.
But yeah, it's
But
the later
Brendan
films
is
that
but Brendan is
definitely
right. In Voyage Home, we do see Sarek start to show a little more. I won't say emotion, but you
compassion.
Compassion. You see him compassion and empathy to where he's compassionate. He understands the Klingons, they want justice, but at the same time, he is loyal and he's thankful to what Kirk has given him back. So you do see him like slightly conflicted there.
like he thaws a little bit.
Yes. And that's why I thought that
having that ending of Star Trek 3 would have made that more effective.
Let's go ahead and move on and see how we can.
Ryan was going to say one more thing.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just would have said that it would have. That's if we had that imagery or that symbolism of them taking David's body to Vulcan, it could have been this moment to where it plays a little bit. It kind of mirrors a little bit back to when Sarek went to Kirk's apartment. How he was a little upset that he felt Kirk disrespected Spock by not keeping his body, to where he sees Kirk bringing David's body to where maybe you can have this moment where he goes, like he tries to apologize.
I was
to you.
wrong.
Yeah, I was wrong. I'm sorry for judging you, for not respecting.
Yeah, no,
my
very good
son.
point. Very
Yeah.
good point.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, folks.
So
Welcome to rewriting Star Trek with Chris.
yeah. Let's connect it. Oh, of course, this has implications all the way through Star
Oh,
Trek
my
6
word,
and
yes.
Generations. Star Trek 6, we know his motivation for not trusting the
Oh,
Klingons
yes.
is this, the death of David, by far.
I mean, this on the short term,
Mhm.
this definitely ties into Star Trek 4, where the Klingon ambassador is lambasting Kirk. And if you notice, in Star Trek 4, and we'll get there next month, the Klingon ambassador throws out a couple of facts that are incorrect.
It's true.
The Klingons are spinning it for their own.
Yeah,
It's the Cold War metaphor.
it's clear they're trying to not trying to cover up their end, but they're trying to completely distance themselves, but place all of that on.
Yeah,
Kirk.
they're compartmentalizing it and blaming somebody else. Also, as you say, this definitely ties into Star Trek 6. I would argue the resurrection of Spock plays into the entire 13 film series in a way that, and even all the shows too, everything is built on the return of Spock.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There actually is a pretty interesting connection that I didn't learn about until I rewatched Discovery.
Ooh.
So Spock is the first in Wrath of Khan to talk about the Mutara sector and the Mutara Nebula.
Mm-hmm.
He knows. He didn't even look in his databanks. He knew about the Mutara sector. Now, that's something I didn't think of. Never thought of till I rewatched Discovery.
That's right.
In Star Trek Discovery, when we learned that Spock had disappeared, he took a shuttlecraft leaving Starbase 5. Guess where he was last seen? The Mutara Nebula.
Huh.
I didn't even realize that. But
Interesting.
so now it makes sense why Spock knew about the Mutara. And I know this is Star Trek 2, but it still all connects. And being that Genesis planet's in the Mutara Nebula,
Mm-hmm.
or was
Or
the
is
Mutara
is the nebula?
Yeah. That was very interesting to me, that connection when they wrote Discovery. It kind of tied that back in a fun way.
Oh, also Star Trek 2009, the JJ one.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Spock cheats to help save the day.
Yeah.
And he says to Kirk, you know, I learned it from an old friend. Is he referring to the events of this film?
Possibly.
That he basically cheats fate because he knows that's what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I love to talk about I even love that conversation he has with the alternate the younger alternate timeline Spock, where he says he kind of manipulated Kirk, and I love how he just like Spock goes, "You lied." No, I just implied, because Spock he is manipulating events in order to, in a way, preserve what made Spock who he is and give his new younger self that opportunity to explore, to become a whole person, not just like, because the one thing of Spock's constant struggle has always been Vulcan or humanity, to where it took Spock like nearly his death.
Emotion is not a weakness, kind of.
Yeah, like both. I'm gonna say this: the films that Spock always has to relearn, the emotion is not a weakness, which is, I will say, the first Star Trek, of Star Trek 4, even in Star Trek 6. Well, actually, 1, 2, 4, and 5 and 6. It's always Spock relearning or just re-understanding that emotion, even though he's half human, is, yeah, what you said, Brandon, not a weakness or something to be cast off. It is something to understand and embrace, but at the same time, it should be level.
It's the meshing of both.
Yes.
Yeah. This
Dare
film
I
is
say it is the best of both worlds?
we made that pun last week, and we're gonna do it again. Yeah, this film is the bridge. It is the bridge, and it is in the trilogy for a reason. And it's again not a bad film. The connecting tissue that it has throughout, and the repercussions that happen from having Spock. Think about it. The reunification, you could even connect to anything Spock has had a hand on. This movie is because of that. The reunification of Vulcan and Romulan in Discovery. Again, reunification in the episodes of Next Generation. Heck, the JJ verse. The JJ verse in of itself doesn't happen without the resurrection of Spock.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
And to bring that one step further, I personally believe that the proto matter that David used was responsible for the unanticipated effect on Spock with the Genesis wave. It had to have been.
I mean, it was never just a plot device just to age him up. I mean,
I get that, but it makes sense.
It is the being cast out of paradise, like to compare it to the Bible.
That's true.
It's a bad thing leads to a good thing.
Absolutely. This film does such a good job of ingraining itself and really hitting that emotional level, that ethos to us. It does. It hits emotion right here, and it's supposed to. And I love it for it. I love the friendship. I love the camaraderie. And it just really shows the love that this crew has for each other. And it justifies that in this film. So gotta be our favorite moments from this. Ryan, as our guest, what was your favorite moment?
I mean, it's really difficult to pull it, but I will see. It's kind of hard, but I will say one of my favorite moments is the toast that Kirk is making at his apartment with the rest of the crew, except Scotty and McCoy. To absent friends, to the Enterprise and to absent friends.
It brings the same toast that Picard makes to Data in Star Trek Nemesis.
And then also he does that. Kirk does that toast in Beyond as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is just a common Starfleet toasts for. There's a data file for it.
Yeah, it's almost like it's an unspoken tradition. But I will say that I like that moment because it's one of those. As a casual fan, it is something to show that Star Trek really has at its core. It has heart. That this crew put together is not just explorers or people who are expendable to a federation, to a government that's a federation of planets. It's all it's oh my god, not recycling, but I don't know,
reigniting
what I remember the Next Generation when they say about humanity in the future. It's all about unity, being together, wanting to bring out the best in each other. And that moment with them in the apartment is that they're all together. They're there to mourn. They're there to celebrate, but then they're also there to reflect, which is a good moment. And it's that moment there which definitely helps. It's the best example and the best reason for whenever someone says, "Well, why didn't the crew go against Kirk, or why didn't the crew have any objection to Kirk's plan?" One, they were gonna do it anyway. Because even if when Kirk told him that news and Kirk made up his mind, not only were they going to support him, they also made plans ahead. I mean, they told Uhura, guess what? She made plans to make sure they were going to get on that to warp onto the Enterprise. They told Scotty, guess what? Scotty was going to disable that transwarp drive to make sure they didn't get caught. And seeing Sulu and Chekhov follow him, they made sure that not only they were there to back up Kirk, but to make sure nobody or no technology was there to stop them or prevent them.
Yep. Brennan, what was your favorite moment?
Escape from Space Dock, hands down. Especially that big crescendo of James Horner's score as they clear the doors. That's just a great moment.
That is. I even like the realism of it when those doors are closing. That intensity, that's really bringing it every time those doors are closing. Like, is there
Yeah.
enough power in that ship to get
Scotty,
them
the
out?
doors. I'm trying, Captain. I'm trying.
For me, the best moments are actually Kirk centric. There are a couple of them because they come in the form of Kirk's interactions with different characters. Kirk and Sarek, their last interaction on the planet or on Vulcan, when his son is fixed and he says, Kirk, I thank you. What you have done is, and Kirk goes, what I have done, I had to do, but at what cost? Your ship, your sons. He did know, he did acknowledge it. I just think it could have been done better. But he says, if I hadn't tried, the cost would have been my soul. But there's a cost. I like that because there's still a deeper darkness to it. There is a cost, and we know eventually what that cost is. It was a piece of his soul still. You know, there were funnier interactions. Him and McCoy, by far. You're suffering from a Vulcan mind meld, Doctor. That green-blooded son of a bitch. It's his revenge for all the arguments he lost. Or even, how are we doing? How are we doing? How are we doing? Funny you should put it quite that way, Jim. We are doing fine, but I'd feel safer giving him one of my kidneys than what's scrambled in my brain. It's funny stuff, you know, and I love the interactions between them. It's just, it's so good. You know, and I think that the best one by far is my God Bones, what have I done? What you had to do. You know what you've always had to do.
And the shot of the Enterprise falling through the atmosphere.
Yes.
Yes.
What is give life a fighting, or was it
turn death into a fighting chance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
And that's a gorgeous shot right there. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, it is the first time that the hero ship was destroyed, which would lead to a long tradition of destroying enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every Star Trek film has one moment where the Enterprise is destroyed.
It's happened, yeah. Let me think. I'm trying to think.
I know.
Yeah, like pretty much. Every Enterprise. Well, we don't know what happened to the B. We don't know about the B. But we do know the original Enterprise was destroyed. The original Enterprise was destroyed. The A was mothballed. The B, we don't know what happened to it. The C, we know it was destroyed in Surrender 3. The D was destroyed. The E, we have no idea. But hey, let's just say it gets destroyed at some point too.
Yes.
And the
Enterprise
and the Kelvin.
And the Kelvin.
Oh my God!
Original Enterprise.
Star Trek. That almost in every Star Trek film. Well,
honorable mention, Voyager has been destroyed more times than I can count and come back. And the Defiant, the death of the first Defiant.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, hero ships being destroyed. It's very common in Star Trek, but this was the first. Final thoughts, Ryan?
Well, I guess when it comes down to this film, I will admit that I will, without a doubt, if I ever meet someone who's interested in the Star Trek, and of course, if they only like the Kelvin films, I say yeah, go for it. But I would still recommend them to at least watch the original 6. I know people be picking, it's like, oh, they don't need to watch this one. No, all 6 of them are a continuum thread. They take certain elements from each film and add on to the next. And I will recommend them to watch Search for Spock because of not only just the great moments, but even the plot holes itself, because it makes you intrigued in this film. It kind of draws you in. As bad as the plot holes are, it just makes me think about this over and over again. But with Search for Spock, I do appreciate in all its value. I do love, the score by James Horner. Leonard Nimoy's first time directing really does a very good job, like really handling it well. And even doing my research on this film, I loved how when this film was released, they did a good job of making sure no one knew Nimoy was coming back. They were just making him as they did not put his name in the credits, only as a director, not as an actor. So then when he did come back and you see the end credits, you do see his name as Spock before you see him as director, which was good.
Brendan, what about you? Final thoughts?
Man, I'm trying to think of anything else to add other than this is a good Star Trek film. Not one of the great ones, but a good one.
It's part of the trilogy. Like I said, it's a bridge, and it's not bad. Its villain needs some help. He is not an awful, terrible, horrible villain like Raffo was. Raffo and Insurrect, that's a terrible villain, and we'll get to them in a couple of months. But
I see what you mean.
Yeah. He's not a terrible villain, not by any means, but he's not a great villain either. And I'm glad he hammed it up and loved it. And we gave John Larroquette work.
Yeah.
I will.
You promised you'd kill me. I'll kill you later.
I love it so much. But yeah, it's definitely worth the watch. I recommend 2, 3, and 4 together. Watch them. Absolutely enjoy that. If that's what you watch as Star Trek movies, that's not a bad way to go. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, first off, I got to thank you, Ryan, for coming in. I appreciate your input and your view of Star Trek.
I think Lieutenant Payne gets a promotion.
I don't know. It took Worf 7 years to make Lieutenant Commander, man. I just don't know if I'm there yet.
I don't want to disrespect Worf, honestly.
I think Worf?
Yeah. I know. I think I need a few more tours before, or at least a few more surveys before I can get bumped up to Lieutenant Commander. I will definitely be okay with the lieutenant rank right now.
Gotcha.
Yes. But to let everyone know, next week is going to be fun. We start our cycle again. The randomizer gets reset, and we find out that next week we are going to the Enterprise. The NX Enterprise. Season 1, episode 3. This is the episode right after the pilot. Fight or Flight.
The randomizer seems to like it to give us season 1.
It likes to give you season. I've noticed that too. But I don't question the randomizer and its wisdom, because
we do not question.
Eventually, the randomizer is going to give us the clip show from Next Generation's 2nd season. It's going to happen.
Shades of Grey. Oh boy.
Yeah, no, we don't want that. But yes, so next week we take a look at Fight or Flight, which is actually one of the few episodes to focus on Ensign Hoshi Sato. And I like when we look at Hoshi. I love Hoshi. So we will get to that. But until then, Ryan, as our guest, where can the people find you?
Well, people can follow me on social media if they want to. I have a Twitter account. Twitter handle is caramel_pain. I don't post a lot, but I do like. But I will. But if you do follow me, you do post, I will like and comment on your post as well. So you will get to hear me share my opinions. Maybe not in a post, but definitely add on to a thread. And you did mention earlier on, Chris, I am a wrestling fan. I do have a podcast I co-host with two of my buddies, Brenton McPherson and James Shimo. Is called the Wrestling Ramblings and Rages podcast. It's available on Spotify, Apple, and let's see. And Anchor as well. We've been in the midst of we have new episodes we recorded, but in the meantime we're getting some old episodes out the way because life kind of screwed up our schedule. So most recently we have episodes where we did a top 10 on wrestling tragedies. We did a bit our own little March Madness bracket of wrestling moments. And coming up soon, myself, James, and Brenton, we're going to be talking about we're going to be doing special editorials on wrestling. And what the topic's going to be, we normally tease it out before we release the episodes.
Ryan, as a fan of wrestling, I got to say, when it comes up, I would love to have you on when we have the episode Sunkatse, which is the Voyager episode with The Rock.
I have heard about that episode.
I want to bring you on when we have I don't know what it'll be.
Randomizer, please don't
when Sunkatse comes, I want you on the show just for the wrestlers aspect to it.
I remember as a kid seeing The Rock promoted for that episode for Voyager.
He's on it for like 2 minutes, but man, is it worth it?
Oh my word.
But yes, we would love to have you back on the show, Brian. You're really great. And some of these episodes, you are more than welcome to join anytime. Brennan, where can the people find you?
Well, you can follow us here at Random Trek, presented by Page Turners They Were Not, which is our podcast network. You can find us on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Also, you can We have I relaunched our YouTube channel, which is just called Page Turners They Were Not, and also my Discord, or our Discord called Page Turners They Were Not.
Mhm.
And then, of course, you can always join me with Mark Riley, Video Drew, A Certain Point of View, Let's Get Ready, Yellow Nation, and here, of course, and so on and so forth.
And of course, you can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Ingle1984. That's Ingle, Ingle, where I'm going to be getting back into playing games on stream. I've been teaching and working so hard, but I thought, you know what? Sometimes I need to relax, and I think I'm going to go back to streaming some pretty cool video games. Maybe we'll do some Star Trek video games. Ooh, I like that idea. But you can also find me, of course, on the Mark Riley Network, Video Drew. You can find me on the Let's Get Ready Network from time to time. Also hanging out with Ben Bateman and so many others on the almost gone movie trivia schmodown adjacent things. But of course, as always, we end every episode. Qapla' and live long and prosper.
Peace and long life.